Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to dive deep into things like, what does our industry need that it just doesn't have? What are the things you want to know, but you're just too afraid to ask? And what are the biggest opportunities ahead for our industry? We're going to go deep, and nothing is off limits. Welcome back to Corralling the Chaos. Today, we are going to dedicate to all things safety and ensuring the safety of all of the event professionals and attendees at events out there. And it's such a big topic given the work and, quite honestly, the risk that our industry takes to put on these epic experiences and shows and all the planning that goes into that. And we often talk about the lack of understanding that consumers of events have, right? Like they show up, they love this event, but they really have no idea all that goes into planning it, putting it together, the risks that go into kind of building these events. And so they're just not privy to all that really kind of happens behind the scenes, and the massive amounts of equipment that has to be unloaded, unpacked, set up, tested, and really what I call the technical minefield that typically exists behind stage. No one really sees all that's happening, behind the curtain. And unfortunately, that just comes with some inherent risks that we all need to be aware of. And so today we want to welcome Ray Brock, the Director of Safety Services, and he also happens to be Lasso's safety consultant. Ray comes to us today with 28 years of consulting in the employee safety field for various clients. Some of his proudest moments as a safety professional include partnering with large companies like Home Depot. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I go into a Home Depot, I feel at risk, right? With everything moving around. So he's done a lot of work with Home Depot and companies like Netflix as well, helping them build effective safety programs. But his real passion is really being in the field, supporting a variety of companies with their on-site efforts to provide a safe working environment. So welcome, Ray, to the show. We are so glad you are here.
Thank you for having me today.
So I'm sure in your 28 years, you've probably seen a number of mishaps, a number of close calls. So we're thrilled to have you here to kind of give us some guidance, since safety is such an important topic in our space, certainly. But tell us, how did you first get involved in safety?
When I was actually transitioning from high school to college, I had an opportunity to work on a tugboat, and we had a steady run from Mobile, Alabama to Freeport, Bahamas, hauling jet fuel. In one of the runs, we actually got to a port, and I had a couple of experiences. One, our barge, after unloading all of the jet fuel, was empty, and it's about 2.5 stories high. And I remember uh, our captain parked the barge next to a string of barges that eventually got you to land. And he said, okay, you guys, you've got your free time. You can now, go to land. And I said, well, how are we supposed to get there? He said, oh, you just jump across each barge. So the first barge that I came to was about, I don't know, it's only about 1.5 feet, 2 feet apart from each other, but it's a 2.5 story drop into the water. And then once you're in the water, you're pretty much gone, because the barges go back and forth and collide into each other. So it took me a while to jump the first barge, but by the seventh barge, I was a gazelle, leaping. And I got to the end of it and I thought, wow, why was that so scary at first? And then it just got easier and easier. Well, there was no consequence to it. And it just started me thinking about safety. And then a couple of days later, while we were there, there was actually an explosion and 2 fatalities that happened. And at that point forward, I just had a passion for learning why these hazards happen, how to prevent them, and the investigative part as well.
Yeah, you're safe until you're not, right? That's a
Yeah.
crazy story. So clearly we're not the only industry out there that has some challenges. That's interesting, jumping from barge to barge. That does not sound fun. But I
It,
get why that catapulted your career. So makes good sense. Well, tell me a little bit about, and tell our audience, When you think about building these events and producing it, everyone, an inherent risk is typically these crews, they don't know each other. This might be the first time they're working together. And so sometimes that adds a different level of complexity or concern because it's different than when you show up and work the same event with the same people. You kind of know how people operate. You kind of understand that people have the same level of concern for safety. And that's just not always the case in our space. So, what are some of the basic things that event companies can do to ensure safety of their crews and their attendees?
Yeah, I think, as we've worked with different event companies and different companies that come in to support those operations as well, what I've learned is even if you have the same type of equipment, the same type of setup, there's just no two events that are ever going to be the same. And so it really comes down to doing the best job of evaluating the hazards, really planning for the worst so that if something happens, you're moving forward in a positive direction. So around pre-planning events and being able to identify the risks and hazards that can hurt employees, and then also putting the controls in place for those particular activities and those particular jobs are really setting you would really set yourself up for success uh, going through the event.
What are some of those controls?
As I was thinking about this presentation today, I kind of walked through on a high level the different stages of the event, and so I look at it from getting to the event. So motor vehicle accidents. The type of identifying. What equipment are you bringing? Are you having to pull a trailer? Is it a box truck you're using? How are you getting to the event? The route, maybe the time of year, environmental conditions around getting to the event as well, and looking at controls around that. Okay, uh, picking your route, understanding the controls around your vehicle, making sure that it's operating correctly, checking the weather. Many times we've seen adverse effects happen in certain events, especially outdoor events, if the weather isn't evaluated correctly. And then also just having the background and understanding how to drive in certain conditions. Sometimes people get to a certain area of town that they may not go to that often. They may be flying in, just understanding the different hazards of the town that you're in as well. I remember the first time I went into DC and I drove around the Capitol, the roads are incredibly confusing, and they were designed that way. And so, you know, before I got there, I had an understanding that okay, these roads are not going to connect the way that I think they should connect, and I need to be able to traverse that. Um, and then getting to the event itself, the loading docks present their own hazards. Understanding what those hazards are of falling off the dock, walking around, moving equipment, walking around the trucks themselves. Pedestrian safety is paramount. As you're working in those docks, some of the potential security risks and working with the different people in those events, and then through the setup the event and the different hazards of working at heights, working with different tools, having the right tools for the job. When we look at event companies, and the timing aspect of getting things set up and running the events can cause people to potentially skip important steps around this.
Yeah, they're
I don't
stressed
have
trying to get it set up in time, right? Yeah, so that's a
right.
great point.
Yeah, so I don't have a hammer right next to me, so I'm going to use the back of the screwdriver, and it ends up that the plastic cracks, and now we have an eye injury or lacerations. I don't necessarily have the right step ladder or A-frame ladder in order to get to the height I need, so I'll stand on this chair. I'll stand on a stack of cases. They seem so. You know, Throughout the entire process, and then taking down these sets, taking down these structures. Um, you're back at those heights as well. And there's a timing aspect of that because there might be an event in a few hours. It might be an event the next day, and they need everything struck. And so I would say that just understanding the right tools and equipment that you need and the hazards for the workplace. Once again, I just can't emphasize enough. It goes back to that pre-planning, and pre-planning doesn't take hours. Pre-planning, especially for an activity, can just take a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to say, okay, I need to get up to this height. I could fall. What type of precautions do I need to take for this particular job?
Yeah, and then being able to lead your people through that, right? It's one thing to have a safety program. It's a
Right,
totally different thing to roll it out, communicate it, train your people on it, make sure they understand it, and make sure we're holding them accountable for it, right? Because a lot of companies, they just stop with checking the box of we've got a safety plan. But at the end of
right.
the day, you want to keep your people safe. And the way to do that is to hold them accountable and inspect what you expect. And doing those extra things. Are you walking around looking for safety hazards and, just being very diligent and vigilant to make sure your people are safe? But I also think, as a crew member, you also have a responsibility to contribute to a safe working environment. So as an employee or as a crew member on these events, what are some things they can do to take the initiative to create their own safe working environment?
As a safety professional, one of the more frustrating items and injuries that I see are people slipping on a floor that has, some sort of liquid on it, or tripping over some sort of item that really shouldn't be there. And in to safety professionals, there's a hierarchy to the type of injuries that you have. So, you know, there's a thought process out there that for every um, 5,000 near misses, there will be 500 first aid cases. There will be 50 serious injuries and 5 fatalities on it. So, it's a numbers game, right? The more darts that you throw at the dartboard, the better you're going to get at hitting the bullseye. When you're thinking about it, it's the near misses. How many times did somebody step over that tripping hazard or step into that liquid and almost get hurt, but didn't get hurt and then just kept going?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for employees to correct hazards as they're going, fix the hazards. If it's something that goes above um, or beyond what you can fix, then say something. Bring it to the attention to someone. If you feel it's an imminent hazard, and this is an OSHA term, OSHA states that the number one reason in OSHA's hierarchy of visiting companies is because somebody's reported an imminent hazard. And this is a hazard that's an immediate threat to the life and safety of employees. So you know, a this isn't a simple tripping hazard. It is something that can kill someone. So being able to identify them, being able to identify those incidents and escalating them through your supervisors and managers is paramount. And on the supervisors and managers part, it's important for the upline or management to be able to communicate back to employees what's been done. And it goes back to what you talked about in getting people trained.
Well, let's talk about training. There's lots of OSHA initiatives. Some states are adopting and mandating certain things, whether it's OSHA 10 or OSHA 30. I think Nevada was, I think, the first to kind of throw down the gauntlet and make it a mandatory requirement, which is, I think, a great thing for our industry. But a lot of people just see that as yet another requirement. I got to take the time out of my day to go sign up and spend 10 hours or 30 hours doing this. But to your point, that's fascinating. For every 5,000 mishaps, and then you kind of went through that hierarchy. And that's a small price to pay to keep yourself safe, to keep your colleagues safe. It's a small price to pay. And I think, I think it makes good sense to do. But there's a new one out there. AB 1775. So tell us about that and why that's so important, since this one is specific for our industry. So tell everybody about AB 1775.
Sure. This is a California, basically a mandatory 10 and 30-hour safety and health course for individuals working in the entertainment industry. The standard goes into, and I mean, I I'm a person, as many people in the industry are that have read it, and this is kind of the way that I have seen the standard. But basically, the contracting entity or company is responsible to ensure that the vendors and people that are working the event have taken either the 10 or 30-hour course, depending on your position within that company. So at the employee level, we see the 10-hour course, and then the supervisor and manager level, the 30-hour course if you're going to be working that event. So this is something that would need to be taken prior to coming on site for the event. These 10 and 30-hour courses have been in place for years in the safety industry. It's interesting. I work in a lot of different industries, and these training classes are available in what's called general industry. So this is something event companies are in. They're in the general industry. Construction has their own set of training, and then maritime has their own set of training as well.
So
Um,
the event industry is categorized under the general curriculum.
yes, yes. So the event industry would be the general industry training on there. OSHA has a set of rules to become an authorized instructor in order to train these. And then they also have approved companies if you're going to do the online option. So they do allow online options, but there's probably, I think right now, I think there's less than 10 companies, or maybe right around 10 companies that are actually approved by OSHA. OSHA doesn't approve much, but they do approve these types of companies, and they're listed on their website. So you need to be careful of the companies that you're engaging in order to do this training. Um, OSHA does state that the online training is perfectly acceptable. They prefer um, an instructor, just because the effectiveness of these classes, and discussion, and being able to ask questions and everything. And I think, these are minimum training requirements that you have to have in order to operate in the industry. However, as you're taking these, the importance of these is to recognize the hazards that are being taught to you in order to prevent yourself from getting injured. So keep that in mind. I mean, I know the card is imperative in order to get on the site, but there's a reason why these classes are mandated. It's to prevent your injuries from, prevent injuries from happening.
That's such a great point that I want to pause and kind of call that out, because for all of you companies out there that, I don't care if you even just do one show in California. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in California. And so either for you companies that are based out there, or any of you companies that might do one or two shows a year or more, I think that's a great call out, right? It's not about the requirement like, oh, we've got to go get these people certified. It's, hey, this is an opportunity to make sure everybody's safe. And that's the
Right.
bigger purpose. That's the bigger point of all of it. And so, yes, it's hard when you're moving fast. I mean, the demand for events right now is through the roof. All of you out there are tasked with doing a whole lot more with so many fewer resources. And so I know the stress and the constraints that you all are under. And so, yes, it's hard when you kind of hear, like, great, there's another requirement, AB 1775 in California, that I have to go do that. But it does serve a much bigger purpose, and it could keep you from one of those fatalities that Ray talked about, or serious injury. And so I think it's a great thing. So just keep that in mind. The law goes into effect January 1st, 2023. I know LASA has been very focused on getting our people OSHA 10 and supervisors, our crew chiefs and leads, OSHA 30 certified. It's just an important initiative, and one that I hope our industry will really rally behind. I know everyone is well intentioned, but sometimes when you're busy, things kind of fall off. And so my hope is we will all rally around this and really do what's right for the industry and right for our people by making sure they're equipped with the knowledge to keep everybody safe. Because I know that's what we all want, right? We all want to make sure everybody's safe, everybody has a good time, and has a great event. Ray, do you think other states are going to follow suit by mandating something similar? I mean, I know Nevada has it.
Right.
What are there other states that are requiring this?
Um, there are no other states that I know of in general industry that
Mhm.
require the 10-hour or 30-hour course. Um, there are at least two other states that require it from a construction standpoint.
Got it.
And we also see the requirements coming in if you're doing work for the state. The state has this as a mandate. So really, this is the first time I've seen it in a private industry setting for general
Mhm.
industry. And I do
Interesting.
want to just take a step back and describe when we talk about the 10 and 30 hour, where the 10 hours, literally 10 instructional hours of safety, of specific safety subjects. And the 30 is 30 instructional hours of those safety subjects. So if you're doing them in person, it's required, the 10 hours required to be a 2 day session. The 30-hour is required to be a 4 day session because OSHA does not allow you to take more than 7 hours in one day. The other item, at least today on this, and I wouldn't be surprised if this changed in the future, but right now the 10 and 30 are good for life. This is not an annual research requirement or every 5 years, every 3 years. If you are an instructor, you're required every 4 years to reauthorize as a trainer. But right now for the participants, taking it once is good for life.
That's really great to know. I'm sure a lot of people were wondering that how often they have to re-up that. So that's good to know, right? That's a really high return on your investment.
Right.
Your safety, your safety for life for investing 10 hours or 30 hours, and the responsibility on that 30. If you're a supervisor, you don't want someone to get hurt on your watch. That's something big to carry. So I think that's great. I also didn't know because so much of our industry they work what we call 10-hour days, and so that's also interesting that they require that to be broken up into 2 days. So that makes sense, right? On the ninth hour you're tired, or you're really going to be paying attention to everything that you need
Absolutely.
to make sure that you're safe. So that makes good sense. um,
Absolutely. OSHA looked at that. They also looked at, and this is on-site instruction. I'm not sure how the companies that automate this through a virtual environment
right.
do it. I would also offer this is not, we're looking for updates on this literally this month, but OSHA is also moving toward allowing these classes to be taught in a virtual environment. So you have your online self-paced that's approved through certain companies, but OSHA is looking to, I should say, expand the allowance of companies to teach these classes in this type of environment.
Got it. Good to know. Really good intel for us all. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Well, I'm sure you've seen a lot in your 28 years, so just curious, do you have a story for us, either let's say a scenario where it was a complete train wreck and you saw so many potential hazards, or we can go with the story where you're like, man, this company really had it together. They'd thought of everything. They really invested in the pre-planning. So any events kind of stand out to you?
Um, I would say this was an outdoor event, but you know, uh, two items stood out for me, and one, it started bad, but the company learned from its mistakes and ended up changing an entire process. But we did have a company that was erecting tents and structures for an outdoor event, and an employee fell a very good distance. He was
Hmm.
probably 14 feet in the air as he was straddling between a scissor lift and the structure while he was attaching part of the structure. So he wasn't tied off or anything. And the scissor lift had a basket, and he opened the door and was outside of the basket. That was probably one of the um, worst injuries that I've seen in that field. But I will say this company then prevented multiple injuries by doing a better job of pre-planning on it. And really, I can't think of any particular instance, but there are several lives that I think were saved. You know, what's interesting in our field is that it's easy to see the adverse effect of a bad injury, but it's hard to see the positive effect of the injury that doesn't happen. So I mean, if you're able to celebrate those wins, you know, if you see something where your safety controls did a good job, I totally agree. Make sure you celebrate those wins because it's hard to quantify the wins. It's easy to quantify the lot, you know, the injuries that happen.
Absolutely,
Unfortunately.
because there's so many even just kind of, accidents that happen in the warehouse, right? Something falls on them, they trip and fall, they cut themselves. Those are still injuries. Those are still inconveniences. Those are still things and hazards, right? It doesn't always have to be something massive as a loss of life, but there's so many other smaller things that can be easily prevented by just being intentional, making sure everyone's rested, making sure everybody is vigilant and looking for those things. And so I think that's a great point. A lot of the good doesn't always get celebrated, and so for those of you out there doing all the right things that haven't had any claims, you should celebrate that, and you should kind of toot your own horn. So I think that's a great point, Ray.
Angela, you've also allowed me on a few site visits. We want to definitely continue those, but I will say I was impressed with the amount of communication that I hear from your worksite employees. I mean, just you know, calling out someone behind you, just the different ways that your employees communicate with each other, at least on the sites that I visit, it's been very impressive. So
Well,
keep
good.
that
Well,
up. It's
we
great.
appreciate that. It's a work in progress, right? It's never going to be done. It's something we always have to, be in the forefront of our mind. Something we always have to be talking about, planning, and making sure everybody's right there with us. With valuing the same, that the same way. And so I appreciate you saying that. Well, this is great. I hope, as we wrap up today, that this is really a reminder to all of us of the importance of being vigilant when it comes to our safety, the safety of our colleagues. So please, please, please don't cut corners. I know it's super stressful. It's a last minute load in. You couldn't get access to the room. Now you're under the gun, or hey, you've got to, dismantle it really quickly and get on to the next one. But please don't cut corners when it comes to those things, and make sure you're rested. Make sure you're putting the things in place. And to Ray's point, invest in the pre-planning. That way you're going in with expectations and can anticipate what could go wrong and have a plan for it. So my hope is all of us can continue to take safety seriously, and make sure we go into this next year with a good plan to ensure that everyone is safe and sound, and that we continue to produce epic events and experiences. So thank you, Ray Brock, for joining us. If you all enjoyed what you heard, don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io.